I'd like to call the town council meeting for the public hearing for Ms. Todd to order. May we all raise and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Can you all please take your seats? Make sure your phones are on silent so we get no distractions. We will start with the public comment, and as I saw, there was nobody on this sheet for public comment, so we can move past that. And then we'll move right into it. This is the public hearing pursuant to Town Charter, Section 19C 2D. I would like to introduce Mr. Shapiro. He is going to be our hearing officer for this duration. He will be running the meeting. He's the one who is in charge, so turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Aaron Shapiro. As you've heard, we are here today for a hearing on the record to consider challenge by Janet Todd to the notice of the town's intent to dismiss her. And the hearing proceeding is structured for that purpose. It will be on the record. We are starting that now. This matter is convened under the authority and structure of the town's charter. Under the charter, the decision on whether to remove Ms. Todd rests with the town council. And the purpose of the hearing today is to develop a full record upon which the council will make its decision. My role is to manage and conduct the hearing. It is not to make a decision on the merits of either the town's or Ms. Todd's respective positions. My responsibilities include maintaining orderly proceedings, directing the order of case presentation, managing the presentation of evidence and testimony, and resolving objections or questions about the foregoing. A transcript is being made of the hearing. Statements by counsel or witness testimony will be recorded. Exhibits entered in the record will also be so identified. And the parties should confer with each other, and we'll make some opportunity for that regarding securing a copy of the transcript, if they have not already done so. To enable the court reporter to make an accurate record, only one person should speak at a time, and should speak clearly so that the reporter can understand and record their statement or testimony. Party counsel will be identified for the record, and each witness will be identified before providing testimony. We will also have the attending council members be identified for the record. So, as a general introduction, in attendance this morning is Janet Todd, represented by council, the town of Greenwood, represented by and through council, and of course members of the town council. So I have not at this point obviously identified each individual present, but we will confirm, if there's any question, that the parties necessary to be here are in fact present. And each participating person will have identified the presence either on a sign-in sheet, if that's what you prefer, or at least a statement in the record reflecting that they are in attendance. So at this point, I will ask party counsel to identify themselves and the respective clients if they choose to do so. I'll ask the town to go first.
This is Anthony Del Colo here for the town of Greenwood, presenting that position today. And I am from the firm of Ovid Kerman. I will say that my colleague Rupa Sabason will be here in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll also say at this point, court reporter, if you need any party to spell the name for the first entry in record, please tell us so.
Thank you.
And for Ms. Todd?
Ron Poliquin on behalf of Janet Todd.
Could I ask the council members to please introduce themselves?
I'm Daniel Nelson, council member for Town of Greenwood.
I'm Brandon Cessna, the council member mayor of Greenwood.
I'm Mike Moran. I'm the secretary and councilman of the town of Greenwood.
Donald Donovan, I'm a councilman for the town of Greenwood.
Thank you. Ms. Todd has requested that this meeting be public, as she is entitled to do under the charter. Limited space available for the hearing may mean that some members of the public who might otherwise desire to attend the proceedings may be unable to do so. Members of the public have been provided an opportunity to make a statement. That time has now passed. With the start of this hearing proceeding, in all subsequent days of the hearing, there will be no further opportunities once the hearing process itself gets started. Attendees are also advised that they may not disrupt the proceedings, and if there is any disruption, those causing the disruption will be requested or directed to leave the hearing room. The order of presentation is going to be the town will proceed first. It has the burden to show that Ms. Todd's removal is appropriate. At the conclusion of the town's presentation, Ms. Todd may proceed with her case. Prior to this morning and the start of the hearing officer, myself, and council conferred to review the standards that will apply to and control this proceeding. Council will present with a summary of that discussion on January 8th, 2026, and a more detailed guidance memorandum on January 12th, 2026. Those documents will be appended to the record. The guidance provided and the instruction outlined, among other factors, the burden of proof that will be relevant here and apply, the evidentiary standard that will also apply. I will not restate here the guidance in its entirety, but I will identify the following for the benefit of the witnesses and council members. Again, the town bears the burden to demonstrate to town council by a preponderance of the evidence that there is just cause to remove Ms. Todd. The definitions for preponderance of the evidence and just cause have been provided to the parties. Each party will have the opportunity to make opening and closing statements with time limitations. Opening statements will be limited to 15 minutes. Ms. Todd may reserve her opening statement until a presentation of her case. Closing statements may be presented at the conclusion of the hearing and will be limited to 25 minutes for each party. Opening and closing statements, while potentially helpful as an aid to counsel's understanding of the parties' presentations, are argument. They are not the equivalent of evidence or testimony. Earlier, the town was granted the request to reserve 10 minutes of its closing opportunity for a rebuttal statement. So looking ahead, the order of presentation for closing statements will be the town proceeding first with 15 minutes for presentation. Ms. Todd will follow with 25 minutes for presentation, and then the town will have 10 minutes for a rebuttal statement. As hearing officer, I have full authority to control the conduct of this hearing, to admit or exclude evidence, to question witnesses, to rule upon motions and objections, and determine the order in which evidence will be presented. Though I will likely defer to party counsel on their preference for the order of such presentation. This hearing is not governed by common law or statutory rules of evidence, or by any technical or formal rules of evidence or procedure. The standard of relevance and materiality will control, and plainly irrelevant, immaterial, and unduly repetitive or cumulative evidence may be excluded. Each party will have the opportunity to call and cross-examine witnesses and to object to evidence and testimony offered for the record. The hearing officer, myself, will rule on such objections. Witnesses will be required to testify under oath and will be sworn by the hearing officer. Witnesses will be sequestered at the party's request and agreement. And that means that any person who will testify as a witness may not be in the hearing room or otherwise have access to testimony provided during the hearing until they are called to testify. Once sworn, no witness may discuss their testimony until they are excused. Witnesses are not necessarily excused once they've concluded their testimony, as they may be subject to rebuttal testimony. No witness is excused until confirmed by counsel and myself. Council members will be permitted to ask questions of the witnesses. When the party who called the witness rests, I will ask council members if they have any questions for that witness. The party who called the witness will have a limited opportunity to redirect the witness on the subject matter of the questions. Similarly, I may have questions for a witness, in which case the party who called the witness will have a limited opportunity to redirect the witness on the subject matter of my questions. The parties have exchanged pre-marked proposed exhibits, some of which have been identified as joint exhibits. Objections to exhibits have been reserved to when they may be offered into the record by the presenting party. The parties were previously provided the opportunity to submit and respond to pre-hearing motions, the purpose of which is to raise to my attention matters they believe impact this hearing, those respective case presentations and council's decision. I have considered and ruled on the motions submitted, and those motions will be appended to the record. As a brief summary of those motions on the subject matter covered, Ms. Todd moved for the recusal of council members and others as hearing panel members. She also moved to change the venue of this hearing and to change the hearing scheduling. I have denied those motions and provided council with my reasons for those denials. The town made a motion to exclude all of Ms. Todd's proffered exhibits. I have denied that motion, and reasons have been provided to council. The town also requested to exclude a statement by Doreen Jones, which was provided yesterday. I have denied that motion, and reasons have been provided to council. The town also moved to preclude hearing panel members from being called as witnesses. I granted that motion in part as a matter of law. My ruling on those motions does not constitute a waiver by the parties of their respective rights on the issues covered, nor a waiver of their ability to raise objections or other challenges as we proceed. Given the nature of the hearing and the process leading up to the start of the hearing, I have offered the parties some time before we get underway with examination of witnesses if they want to offer any statements into the record regarding their motions and the decisions thereon. I will provide each party with 5 minutes if they so choose, starting with the town.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. First, as to the motion to exclude materials, the town proffered an argument regarding essentially a balance of the equities and the propriety of same related to representations made by Ms. Todd's counsel and to the investigator regarding a lack of possession of materials and property of the town. Much of the evidence, as I understand it, I'm sure we'll hear more later about what they exactly are and why they're being proffered. Much of the evidence, documentary evidence provided by Ms. Todd at the time of exchange of exhibits was, in my view, plainly materials that would be considered fairly town property or town documents. So in light of the unequivocal representation made earlier about a lack of having such materials, I felt it would be appropriate to make that motion as a procedural matter. I can report that Mr. Shapiro heard argument from both sides and that procedural motion was addressed, although I reserve the right to dig into the substance of that, of course, during testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Poliquin?
Yeah, I'm just going to correct the record that Mr. Shapiro heard argument on both sides regarding the documentation. He did not. I essentially did not respond to that. I'll respond now that it's been opened. The representation that was made to Mr. DiCarlo regarding Ms. Todd was the materials that she took on the day she was locked out of council. The materials that are being spoken of were materials that were forwarded to her private email months and months prior to her still being town manager. So there was a discussion between the town solicitor, Mr. DiCarlo and myself regarding whether what materials she took, Ms. Todd took on the day that she left, and those that were correctly, completely, and transparently represented. So I just want to address that. As far as the date of the hearing, this hearing should have been rescheduled. I had given Mr. DiCarlo several dates that were fit in within the guidelines, and the hearing was specifically scheduled on a date I was not available. In addition, we had essentially 5 business days to prepare for this hearing. We don't have the ability to call witnesses or subpoena witnesses. So to have this hearing date pushed through so we can avoid an election, do it before the election, I feel was unfair to Ms. Todd. We have 9 counts we have to address. We have hundreds of materials we had to go through. I don't think anyone you know, I had to go through that in the time span allowed. In addition, we had an administrative investigative report that references unnamed witnesses, unreferenced, relies on documents that are unnamed. So it was just simply unfair to Ms. Todd to have this hearing on this date. And we also made a request that the second day of the hearing be pushed off to another date, which has been denied. So that's what I want to address as far as the date of the hearing. As far as the request to change the venue, this venue is woefully inadequate to handle the public hearing like this. I think there might be a FOIA violation here regarding, public's allowed, that's what a public hearing is for. And we're on top of each other right now. And it's already been conceded that there's gonna be members of the public that are not able to attend. So considering how many individuals we have just participating hearing, to deny the venue, I think was, I just wanna put that on the record. Now, we have 3 council members here, Donovan, Councilman, Mayor Cessna, and Councilman Nelson, that have conflicts of interest in this case. They have clear bias against Ms. Todd. She's filed grievances against all 3 of them. They've already expressed hostile comments against her, and now they are going to be supposed to be neutral adjudicators. And as far as Councilman Donovan, Ms. Todd had participated in a public integrity commission where there was findings against Councilman Donovan. So we feel that based on just perceived bias and bias in general, in addition, these 3 individuals were accusers of Ms. Todd as based on as far as administrative investigative report. So for them to be on sitting, they can't one their bias, and they can't be neutral adjudicators. 2, they're actually witnesses in the case, and now we cannot cross-examine them, we cannot have them testify, and we are in a position where the individuals that are accusing Ms. Todd of this conduct are actually supposed to be neutral adjudicators in the case. So certainly those are going to be ripe review, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Before we proceed, are there any administrative questions regarding the order process of the hearing? Hearing none, I will then now direct the town to begin the case presentation.
So,
Yeah, just do we have a sequestration of witnesses beginning now, or?
I have already made the statement that.
I'm sorry, I'm just making sure, I didn't hear you.
So, since I don't know who the witnesses are there any prospective witnesses currently in the room? Okay. Then my next question will be, should we close that door? If there are any waiting out in the hall.
check to see if there's any reading in the hallway. So I want the record to reflect that I shut the door where the acting town manager and the town clerk sit. There's a door that is attached to their office that I shut. And Mr. Campanella is in the general area out there who's going to be our first witness, but I shut the door as well so that he doesn't hear our opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Del Colo, and I can confirm that there are no open doors in the room and it is otherwise sealed. Parties may begin with their opening statements, starting with the town.
So I just want to briefly address some of the remarks that were made during the colloquy on the motions. I think it's a gross mischaracterization to say that this proceeding is going forward because of an election. And it's disturbing to me that there were direct discussions about the legal nuances of the sufficiency of the panel and whether or not there would be objections to same in the event that we couldn't manage and had to extend the time. So I just wanted to, make clear that I don't think that that characterization is fair or appropriate. I'll also note that the charter has a clear time frame in which these matters must proceed. And this hearing is a creature of the law, such as it is, that is dictated by the charter itself, which is essentially like the constitution of the town, to use a metaphor. And so it was entirely within Ms. Todd's control and her counsel's control to select a time frame in which this matter could proceed, and in fact had 15 days to look at a calendar, decide when to make the request, and select it in such a way to minimize conflicts. That was not done should not be now used as an opportunity to engage in the casting of aspersions regarding the significant efforts that we're engaged in to try to accommodate additional hearing dates. And I just wanted to make mention of that there was entire control to address and mitigate any perceived impacts on a schedule from my perspective based upon the manner in which the charter reads and the fact that the ball was proverbially in Ms. Todd's court regarding sitting. As to the issue of bias, I just wanted to briefly point out that there is a clear legal standard that exists regarding such recusals, which is that there's a presumption of fairness and impartiality. That legal standard was addressed and thoroughly considered, and the only information that was presented for me to summarize was that because there are concerns being asserted by Ms. Todd that she has various issues and problems with certain members of council for whatever reasons in so-called grievance documents, that's why there's somehow bias. And mere assertions about knowledge of underlying facts is not sufficient to achieve a recusal, which is the only thing that I think, in fairness, has been presented by Ms. Todd. So I thought that it was important to point that out. As to the actual information today, at the conclusion of the proceedings, you will be presented with information. You will see that we have presented information that outlines independent, direct, non-hearsay bases to sustain, under a standard of just cause, each of the 9 allegations that are asserted in the notice of intent to terminate. And there will be evidence presented and testimony presented as to what facts align with each. And at the conclusion of this, I will ask for a finding, for a ruling that is consistent with the evidence that is presented. I suspect today that you will hear various explanations provided through Ms. Todd, perhaps through her witnesses, about why certain things are not certain ways. All I'll say about what I anticipate occurring is that documents, in fact, speak for themselves, and I would encourage you to consider strongly when documents are being contradicted and the balance of credibility of various statements and such items, because I expect that we're going to get some issues and some statements that are inconsistent throughout the course of this proceeding. And I think at the end of it, there will be significant documentary support for each of the noted allegations. Briefly on the issue of just cause and why I think it will be met, I would contend that the basic gravamen of that legal standard is that, is there by a preponderance, is it more likely than not the items that were asserted in fact occurred? And do those things that are asserted, is there some reasonable standard that Ms. Todd was aware of that relates to the interests of her employer? Obviously, something that is extraneous or unrelated to the interests of the town would not be something that would be appropriate to consider. And so I'll be asking you to consider whether or not in the allegations there's alignment between the interests of the town, the clearly mandated duties in the charter and in the handbook and the job description, and whether there is evidence that standards of conduct were not followed or affirmatively transgressed at the close of the presentation of our case. We think that's the standard, and we believe that we'll be able to meet our burden, which is a preponderance of the evidence, or in layman's terms, we would submit more likely than not that the items occurred. I appreciate everyone's time today. to be available to consider this matter, and at that, I'll conclude.
Thank you. Mr. Poliquin, would you like?
Yes, thank you. It's nice to hear, Mr. Coca-Cola, I think, has conceded there's another side, like they used to say, there's another side to this story. I think this is a case that the theme would be a lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak. Let's throw a lot of mud up against the wall and see what sticks. We have 9 charges here. The basis for this claim is an fatally flawed administrative investigative report. And wait and look at how many times, and we have an investigator, a former police officer, that talks about multiple witnesses and documentary records confirmed, yet doesn't state who the heck he interviewed, doesn't state what documents confirm this. Miss Todd has been a loyal servant of this town since 2019. Frankly, she's the person that's gotten through this town through thick and thin. She has thoroughly cooperated with audits, with financial reports, with disclosures. She's somebody, and you'll see that in the documentary record. Now I have right here, I'm gonna do a little Ronald Reagan impression. When he looks at the budget, let's see how much is really in here. Well, how much steak is in here and how much sizzle's in here. As far as, we had a presentation just a few months ago by the auditor that was doing this, and they named a lot of corrections, and they talked about how the town can do things differently. And one of the flaws wasn't that they weren't being like Ms. Todd was not being cooperative. And if you go back to that hearing, or go back to that meeting, May 14, 2025, what's specifically stated is no instances of non-compliance. Similar to other small towns, having to hire more people or outsource. There was problems prior to Ms. Todd coming here. There was a town manager that was the delay. That previous records had to be recreated because of this. That because of a change of software. Invoices missing. 2020, before Ms. Todd became town manager, created the backlog that caused all this. We have an exhibit on from PCAS as of February 21st, 2024, Exhibit 22, saying that their audits of 2020, 2021, and 2022 were completed, and some of those are being held up because of other bank accounts. That's not because of Ms. Todd. She did everything she could do possibly to provide the records. They were a mess. That's not because of Ms. Todd. This is a small town. She's one person. So I think the evidence will show that a lot of these charges are trumped up, that the investigator chose to believe who he wanted to believe and ignored a lot of evidence, and that's how he came to his findings. And I would ask that you, as your duty as neutral adjudicators, say, was Todd doing her job? And I think the ultimate answer will be yes. She's doing the job to the best of her ability under the circumstances. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we are ready to proceed with the town's case presentation. Mr. Del Colo, you may call your first witness.
For our first witness, we're going to call Mr. Campanello, the investigator.
Do you plan to ask witnesses to spell their name again?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Before we get started, may I take a short lesson break?
You may.
I object. No. Objection withdrawn.
Thanks.
We are off the record, pending a short break.
Do you guys have corn?
I don't.
I probably do. Okay. Then it's really good.
Okay.
Okay.
Ever since COVID, I stopped like carrying cards.
I know, I understand.
I like reverted to being a teenager.
Yeah.
So,
That's fair enough.
Probably will at some point.
I don't know who's swearing.
She is, I think.
Do you need a Bible for swearing in?
Right
There's
there.
a Bible down there, that's good.
Put it there when it's done.
And you're gonna, I'm on swearing, you can swear whatever you prefer.
I was supposed to do that, but you're also welcome to. I was not anticipating that they would need to swear by it unless they wanted to. So they just need to swear and affirm on the rest.
But I did see there's one place in English.
We have one in cases, that's all, they didn't know which is the proper way to do it.
You want to find it now?
Yeah, here,
No, no,
I think that'd
I'm
be
fine.
easier than shuffling
Well, what
around.
about them getting them loggers?
Yeah, let me just, because I'm gonna be flipping through things. I'll just put this stuff up here so we can access it when I'm referencing things. Yeah, they're gonna be the same binder for everyone.
Could you just turn it a little so I can keep track of what it is? Thank you.
I'll use this as my
You can move that chair if you care, whatever makes you comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you ready to go on the record?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. We're back on the record. The town may call its first witness. And just for everybody to know, I will be swearing in the witnesses.
So as our first witness, we call Mr. John Campanella.
Mr. Campanella, please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm or affirm that the testimony you are going to provide is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Campanella, first as a matter of housekeeping, could you please spell your name for the record?
Sure, John, John, last name Campanella, C-A-M as in Mary, P-A-N as in Nancy, P-L-L-A.
And could you please outline for council's consideration, in brief, your experience specifically as an investigator?
Yes, sir. Good morning. For the past 8.5 years, I have been self-employed as a consultant conducting workplace investigations. Prior to that, I spent 32 years with the Delaware State Police. While in that career, was engaged in investigative functions throughout my career at many different levels, including external investigations as well as internal investigations. And as mentioned, since retiring, I've continued to work in the private sector. Along with that, I hold a senior certification in human resources management, as well as a certification in the badge to conduct workplace investigations. If I had to estimate, I've conducted hundreds of investigations throughout my 2 careers.
So I'll start first with your report, which is at exhibit, bear with me for a moment here. It's exhibit 20. If you could turn to exhibit 20 in the binder in front of you for a minute. Give you a moment to look at the document, if you could. Just let me know when you've had a chance to confirm what it is.
I have.
Does that document your report, sir?
It is.
And how is it that you ended up generating this report? If you could just kind of explain your process as you conducted this investigation.
Sure. Before completing the report, my general practice in engaging in any internal investigation or workplace investigation is to start with the complainant, start with gathering the facts. So in creating this report, I had interviewed folks as to their concern, identified witnesses. My general course of action after identifying witnesses, I will interview all the witnesses, and then I will interview the subject of an internal inquiry. Any additional witnesses, I will generally ask for both sides documentation, written records, and anything else that may be presented. In this case, I was presented with materials that included videos, printed documents, as well as online documentation. Reviewed all those. From that, I conduct my own analysis, reach my conclusions, and then summarize them in a report.
So, in this case, just while it's on my mind, and because you mentioned it, you mentioned that you asked both sides to present documents. Did Ms. Todd provide you with any documents in the course of your outreach to her?
No, sir.
Okay. And how many times did you reach out to try to acquire any documents that Ms. Todd might have wanted you to consider for your process?
At the interview, I had requested and she had offered that she had documentation that she could provide. So I invited her to send them to me. I provided her with my email address. That evening, I sent a confirmation of the information that she had agreed to send me. I waited about 4 days, I think it was the following business week. Sent an email because I had in the email confirmation that night, asked that she please submit these documents by a certain timeline. And that timeline had expired, so I had reached out to be sure that she had nothing to provide because I did not get a reply to any of the emails. When I sent my second email, I believe it was on that Monday, later in the afternoon, it immediately kicked back with an error, email has been blocked.
So, you did get a chance to interview Ms. Todd.
I did, yes, sir.
Right. And I know that, you may not have the comprehensive list right in front of you of everyone you interviewed, but you interviewed each of the town's employees, is that accurate?
Most of them, yes.
Okay. Do you know which ones you didn't interview?
I'm sorry.
Do you know which ones you did not interview?
Actually, I think I interviewed, sorry, it's going through my mind here. I believe there's only 6 employees, so yes, I did interview all of them, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And did you also seek out information from council members?
I did.
And did you interview each of the council members?
I did, yes, sir.
So you didn't exclude anyone from consideration in terms of having relevant evidence?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to walk through your report, and there are places throughout your report, where you reference witnesses said this, or the documents indicated that. So part of what I'm going to ask you to explain to us is, in places where you have references like that, what were you considering? What caused you to draw the conclusion in question? So I won't belabor things with the background statement, and I'll ask you to just flip directly to page 5, allegation 1. If you could outline for us what the allegation is, how you concluded that there was like a relevant standard against which to make the allegation, or where the standard is coming from that you thought might be at issue, and then also, if you just walk through this and explain, how you gathered the evidence and what you considered for this one.
Yes, sir. So the first area that I had examined, and one of the first areas that came to light as part of the complaint, is that the audits for the town had not been completed. It became my understanding in looking at the charter and the documentation and speaking with the witnesses that the town is required to conduct an annual audit of their finances. So when examining the records, one of the things is I went back to take a look to see the historic dates of when they had been completed. As part of my inquiry, I noticed that in the few years leading up to 2019, generally speaking, that annual audits were completed by the town sometime in the first 6 months, late in the first quarter, the second quarter. It was brought to my attention that there had not been any town audits completed, and actually just recently, the oldest year had been completed, so I should stand corrected on that they just finished, I believe it was 2020, whatever the longest year was, so that had been completed, but the records show that that audit was delayed by several years, and none of the other audits had been completed. It did show that there was progress being made on them, but none of them were done at the time. In continuing interviewing witnesses, it came to light that besides the audits not being conducted, that monthly reconciliations of accounts were way behind and not completed. The town has about 10 accounts, if I think I'm correct, and I, during my investigations, found that all 10 of those had not been reconciled in any recent time, some of them several years behind. When inquiring as to, because I'm not a financial expert, why those are important, that is learned that these monthly reconciliations need to be completed to know how much money is there, and they're needed to complete the audits. I came to the understanding that there was a fair number of documents and reconciliation transaction records that had not been completed. And in reviewing those, sir, it became evident that at least 4 of the audits still were not completed, and 1 was significantly delayed, and none of the accounts were reconciled at the time when the staff took over that function.
So, just to pull out and clarify some items, when you mentioned 4 of the audits not completed, you're talking about...
Wait, I didn't hear that. When you mentioned
4 audits not being completed, you're referencing the mandated annual audits.
Yes.
Okay. So, I think you testified that when you reviewed documents, 2021 had been completed, but the others, meaning from years between 2021 and the present day, had not been.
One of the latest year, I have to take a look, but I believe it may have been 2020, whatever the oldest aging audit had just been completed that summer. But I believe they were 5 years behind, but the latest one, whatever that year was, sir, 20 or 2021, I don't have it exactly in front of me. That was done, but the other ones were not completed yet.
Okay, so I asked you a sort of compound question in the beginning for the sake of expediency, so I'll unpack that. I asked you about, what standard you felt applied to this allegation. So, meaning, how do we know that this is something that Ms. Todd would be responsible for, and that she failed in some respect to address that responsibility? Could you elaborate on where you drew your view as to the standard of conduct here?
Yes, I believe that requirement is in their town charter that requires the annual audit. And in speaking even beyond that with the other professionals that interviewed that were in the industry, they stated that that is a practice that any organization or company, in particular that would do that each year to conduct annual audits. So based on the requirements in the charter and testimony from witnesses about annual requirements, that's the standard by which I drew the conclusion that they had not been completed.
So let's talk a little bit about first some of the documentation that you may have reviewed in connection with this. And then again, from your recollection, what sort of documents did you look at in investigating, or I should say, what documents did you look at that caused you to draw this conclusion?
So, well, first, the absence of audits in and of itself was there. I was presented with town minutes that showed ongoing conversations throughout the years regarding the audits. So town minutes had indicated the audits had not been completed. There was email communications that was shared with me, seeking information, seeking contracts with the auditing company. So it was determined based on that. That's how I was able to determine that they were not done.
Right. Now, what about some of the, if you can recall, individuals that you interviewed that had pertinent information related to this allegation? Could you outline who the folks were you spoke to?
Yeah, I spoke with all the folks on the town council and asked them about it. They all had affirmed it was in the minutes. I spoke with the acting town manager, and I also spoke with representatives from, I believe the most recent company is PKS or whoever the most recent vendor is. That's who I spoke with.
You mentioned other professionals. Was it PKS who alluded to what the standard would be for annual audits in their experience?
Yes, and in speaking with them, they said that that is what's done in business.
Okay. And you also mentioned interaction with the acting town manager. Could you elaborate a little bit about the information she shared with you?
Yes, again, when I spoke with the acting town manager, the person confirmed also that the audits had not been completed. And asking her what she found, she said that she found lots of documents that had not been entered. She found that all the accounts had not been reconciled in a timely manner. I did ask for a list of that. She provided me with a list and identified 10 different accounts, and she gave me approximate dates when they were last reconciled.
So the information, for example, on this page 6 that you were referencing involving dates of reconciliation of accounts, that came from the acting town manager?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then I'm assuming you asked Ms. Todd about audit issues. Is that accurate?
I did.
And what information, I know that there's a transcript of the interview and we're not going to go through every line of that, at least not right now, but how would you characterize or how would you summarize the information that Ms. Todd provided in response to questions about the annual audit process?
Yes, Ms. Todd did acknowledge that the audits were delayed and did confirm that the most recent one, well, one was completed for the oldest. She did acknowledge that they were not completed. They were far behind. She had indicated that they were working on them. She provided some explanations that included difficulty in finding records. She indicated that a previous vendor had deleted some records that complicated things. She indicated, again, lack of resources on her own self being able to complete it. She did indicate that she submitted information and was working with the vendors to try to get it rectified.
So in considering her explanations to you, why after she provided those explanations did you nevertheless conclude that there was information sufficient to sustain the allegation?
The emails, the trails, when I asked Ms. Todd the reason why they weren't done, the reasons were always it was about staffing or it was someone else's issue. They were working on them, but given that the charter does require, and that function does fall upon Ms. Todd as the town manager, they weren't completed. She acknowledged they weren't completed, and they certainly weren't done in a timely manner. From that, comparing to what I had mentioned earlier, that the charter requires it, PKS, the experts say that annual audits are required. That's when I drew that conclusion that they were not completed in a timely manner.
Okay. And in fact, the ultimate responsibility for that, from what you reviewed, fell to Ms. Todd.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to ask you to turn to the next page for allegation number 2. for the sake of expediency, if you could provide your responses to the same information that I asked about allegation 1 for the council's consideration, I would appreciate that. After you've had a chance to review it, of course.
Sure, I'm just glancing over it. The second allegation was primarily the failure to notify PKS and take care of other audit-related tasks that were required by a resolution of the council in June of 2025. In looking at the town minutes, there was a resolution that had put forward 4 distinct actions for Ms. Todd to address the delinquent audits. One of them was to issue an RFP back for years 21 through 24. The second provision of that was to provide monthly written audit status updates. The third part was to prepare and present at the July 2025 meeting audit preparation timeline. And the fourth was to notify PKS and arrange for them to attend the July council meeting. And looking over the records, there was a lot of emails back and forth. I looked at emails that seemed to keep coming back from Ms. Todd and others, asking for questions and providing some of the information partially. But really what honed on was probably one that looked like one of the very specific charges. It was to have representatives from PKS at that July meeting. When looking at the communication and the minutes, it seemed to indicate that Ms. Todd had advised the council that the individuals from PKS were not available. They were not able to make themselves available. In further research and looking at email communications, not only provided by PKS, but also in Ms. Todd's account, it became obvious that the request from Ms. Todd to PKS didn't come in a timely manner. Not after the meeting in June, but it came 5 days before the actual meeting in July. The response back in the communication from PKS was it did short notice. They had obligations, but they could make changes if they needed to be there. There was an exchange of emails back and forth, and ultimately Ms. Todd sent another email on, I believe, Monday or Tuesday, days before, saying you don't need to be there. When looking at the minutes, it appears there were several vague explanations by Ms. Todd as to why, one, they're not available, they can't be available on short notice, it's going to cost $1,000. Vice Massey said you don't have to attend, and some of that came from emails and some of that came from interviewing with Ms. Todd. So on specific item for number 4, it appears that for some reason Ms. Todd did not notify them in a timely manner and make that representation that was out within 5 days. There was not a timeline presented, nothing in the minutes, and I believe in the minutes she said she wasn't able to prepare that. And then there was some back and forth if an RFP was issued or not, but from interviewing the witnesses from the council as to the resolve of July 2025, the witnesses stated that the provisions of that resolution were not met.
So I just want to make sure the record's clear regarding specifically the email traffic and your understanding of how things unfolded regarding the attendance, the directive that was provided by the vote of council for the attendance of the PKS representative. What was the sequence? And I know the emails aren't in front of you. We're going to go through the exhibits later, of course. But specifically, what was the sequence, if you could just hit that blow by blow for us, of representations made by whom about the circumstances of that individual actually showing up or not to the meeting?
Again, as mentioned, the first email from Ms. Todd to PKS that I was able to locate and also provided by them was I mentioned 5 days before the meeting. And the response that came back in a timely manner from PKS, again, it was short notice. They have another obligation, but they could adjust if it needed to be. It was several days later, when there was another email from Ms. Todd to PKS that you do not need to attend. And I believe that email said authority of Vice Mayor Massey. And that is my recollection of that specific on that notification. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. And then did you see any different representations or explanations provided from the records you reviewed that, you know, did the explanation, in other words, for why the PKS representative didn't show up change over time, or were there conflicting representations at some point in time? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, as mentioned, there was communications that I read in the minutes, and from the end of it's gonna cost money, that they weren't available. And that's the best one. One was, it was about the money, and then the second was that the vice mayor said they didn't have to be there. And then I think there was another communication that Ms. Todd thought that someone else from the council was already in communication with them. And that was about the extent of what I can recall.
Thank you. And so I just want the record to reflect, and you know, this will be introduced, but for the sake of the record, you're actually quoting emails and communications in your report in terms of the conclusions you drew. There's like italic here in your report. So you're quoting some of this directly in your report.
What are you referring to?
On page 8.
Yeah, if I have something in quotes that would have come from a document.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to allegation 3. If you could, again, provide the standard that you looked at to ascertain the existence of a possible transgression, and then summarize what information you received, whether from a witness or a document, and explain your conclusion.
Thank you. From interviewing the witnesses and the complainant, there was concerns about emails and communications going out requesting information from Ms. Todd, and in which they said they either didn't get a response or received a non-answer or other explanations, including ones that recording of prior minutes or saying that was somebody else's responsibility. There was numerous traffic back and forth between the minutes and emails that reflected a general resistance to providing information to members of council. There was also communications in between her and other department heads regarding access to internal control programs and other records and things that were delayed. In speaking with the accounting firm PKS and others, there were information from them and emails requesting documentation in which extended period of times would go by or they did not receive information. There were information that was provided back from witnesses that said when they were asked for information, they were told, well, I'm not able to provide that to you, it's privileged attorney information, or I can't provide it because it was FOIA violations. There always seemed to be a reason, according to the witnesses and from what I can see in the emails, as to not just to directly reply or hit one of the requirements or one of the directives.
So you mentioned PKS. Were there, and you mentioned, I think, communication. So you reviewed, if I understand correctly, I guess email communications in connection with this one?
Yes, emails and speaking with them. There was, again, lots of emails, lots of documents to get through.
And what about, you know, you mentioned references from PKS about some information regarding this. Were there others you spoke to aside from, and do you recall who from PKS you spoke to?
Not exactly now. It was a person who was
Does the
assigned.
name Ashley Stern ring a
Yes.
bell?
Sorry.
Is that who you spoke to?
Ashley, yes ma'am, yes sir.
Understood. And who were some of the other interviews you conducted, or I should say, who were some of the other individuals who provided information that turned out to be relevant to this one?
Specifically, council members in the request back and forth, the chief of police.
Okay. And what did the chief convey regarding this issue?
There was concerns over time management and software and programs and how they should be managing their time, what programs they should be using. There was numerous communications, and not only by email, but also in minutes from councils. The chief attempting or trying to get administrative access so that the chief could review payroll for the officers that work for them. There was significant delays and obtaining that administrative approval, and eventually, I believe it came from direction of the council that it eventually happened. So just a pushback and a delay of weeks, and it was very difficult just to obtain administrative oversight of his own personnel.
Like to review timesheets, is that what you're referencing when you say
Yes,
that?
timesheets and making sure that the hours are charged to the right accounts, things of that sort.
Understood. So with respect to allegation 4, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the same questions, the same information I'd ask you to provide with respect to allegation 4.
Okay, this is the allegation regarding improper claiming and authorization of overtime. When I met with council, I was provided with a report that was done from the council, as well as a large amount of documentations that had copies of Ms. Todd's pay sheets or payroll sheets, as well as a comprehensive audit of overtime in which she had paid herself over numerous years. In those interviews, it was learned that Ms. Todd had been advanced to the job as the town manager, and the town manager was a salaried position. The crux of the report was, as a salaried employee, it was pointed out that this overtime had been worked, authorized, and paid by Ms. Todd to herself without any oversight or authorization. So with that, I was able to go through those records, looking for documentation. There were numerous notes on her timesheets. One in particular, in January of 2022, there was a note that says, begin salary, discussed with mayor. And in the QuickBooks entry, several months later in June, there was a second note that said, mayor stated, move to salary on June 3rd, 2022. There were other notes as I went through that I was able to draw the conclusion that Ms. Todd knew she was a salary employee. There was times when she worked over 40 hours. She showed the extra hours, but wrote 40 salary. And I believe also there was a time with one of those, she even, under her pen, drew an unhappy, a sad smile. So from that, I was able to determine that Ms. Todd is a salaried employee. It was the intention of the council and the town that how it's a salaried employee. It was communicated to her own notes that was there, but yet for some reason, there were a significant amount of overtime paid to her over numerous years.
Did you, I mean, I know that I didn't get into it for the last allegation, but for this one, I'm assuming you asked Ms. Todd about all the allegations, but for this one in particular, you asked Ms. Todd about this.
Absolutely.
And is it accurate that, in fact, so that I don't have to keep asking that question, you asked Ms. Todd about each of the underlying facts and assertions in each of these allegations?
I did.
During her interview. So, okay, so with specific respect to this one, what explanation did she provide regarding how this payment of overtime issue developed?
Ms. Todd said that she was authorized for overtime. When I asked by whom, she indicated to me, she says, well, when I was hired, I was told that I get paid overtime to come to meetings, and that she had emails authorizing her overtime. I did clarify with her when she was hired as a town clerk. which was an hourly position. We talked about her promotion to town manager and being salary, and she said there was nothing ever documented in the council minutes that said she was salaried. And that she has permission and that she has emails that she can send me.
Did she ever send you emails regarding overtime at all?
No, and she also said it was in the minutes authorizing her, and I asked for copies of those, or which particular months, and I did not get any follow-up to that either.
So, in connection with this one, did you take a look at the town's employee handbook?
I did.
And what did it say about overtime, if you could summarize in the handbook?
In brief, it talks about overtime, but it was clear in there, it says that if an employee is categorized as salaried, that they are not entitled to overtime. Overtime specifically, regardless of the employee, there's a provision in there that says overtime needs to be pre-approved by their supervisors.
So, to your understanding, who would be Ms. Todd's supervisor?
It was communicated to me by the council and by herself that she reports directly to the council.
So did you find any authorizations from council specifically authorizing payment of overtime?
I did not.
Okay. Moving on to allegation 5, could you please provide the standard that you were looking at, that you felt was violated or transgressed, and then also provide a summary of the information that you received which allowed you to draw that conclusion?
Allegation 5 is the failure to maintain professional conduct. Answering your first question first, that talk about the standard, the charter and the handbook provides that all employees, in particular the town managers, shall conduct themselves in a professional manner at all times. In interviewing the witnesses and reviewing minutes and reviewing audio tapes of meetings, in particular in June and July, it was brought to my attention that there was communication during the town meetings in which it was alleged and confirmed by several witnesses that Ms. Todd's response to the mayor were deemed as inappropriate, confrontational, and disrespectful, speaking over the mayor and with a tone. Sticking with June, in this line, that immediately following the June meeting, there was a complaint filed by the chief of police to the mayor about behavior and conduct by Ms. Todd immediately following the meetings in her office, immediately outside of these chambers, in which during the time she was using profanity and talking about what the chief reported to be about him. He was in direct earshot of it, as outside the office, based on the topics of it. And he went in and to the office, there was Ms. Todd as well as another council member present in the office. The conversation stopped by Ms. Todd when he entered the office. There was at least other folks present, including other police officers, and that conduct was reported back to the mayor as extremely unprofessional, directed at him. Again, this is immediately following as you were coming out of the meeting. Apparently at the July meeting, some of the same behaviors was displayed by Ms. Todd. There was conversation back and forth with with the members of the council. And at some point during that, Ms. Todd abruptly got up and left the meeting.
Did you have the chance to review any footage of the meetings in question in connection with your investigation?
Some I have footage, others I just have audio.
Okay. And in your independent view, as somebody who's done, I don't know if you specifically mentioned this, but is it accurate that you also did internal affairs investigation during your time with the state police?
I did.
So you've investigated, I'm assuming, situations before involving potential unprofessional or disrespectful conduct in the workplace.
Yes, not only there, but also I do that in the private sector now.
Right. So setting aside any characterizations made about Ms. Todd's behavior, what is your view of, getting upset, as you characterized it, using profanity after a council meeting, and also what you saw and heard? What is your view of that behavior, given your past experience?
That it's for someone in the position of town manager, that it did not conform with the standard of professional conduct, respectful. Her use of language and behavior would, I think as I mentioned, the report shine poorly upon her as well as the town.
Okay. And with respect to the specific issue of the remarks made at the close of, or after the council session concluded, of course, those aren't recorded. Who did you speak to about that piece of it in terms of developing your understanding of what transpired?
I interviewed the chief of police who had authored the complaint to the mayor, as well as other witnesses, the other two police officers, and a council member.
Okay. So moving on to allegation 6, could you please summarize the standard at issue that you got kind of developed, or how you concluded that there was a transgression and the facts and circumstances leading to this one, please?
Yes, allegation 6 is the lack of candor or misrepresentation to the council regarding the K-9 program. This stemmed around the acquisition of a K-9 in on or around May to June, April, May, June 2025. Have the dates correct. That in short, because I don't want to drag it up, but the town was looking at starting a K-9 program. The police department was authorized to start a program. The police department had found a K-9 that was being donated by a local kennel that specializes in this type of animals. And during that exchange, there was a time when Ms. Todd obtained veterinary records of the dog, and then collectively brought those into an executive session where she made statements about the dog and portrayed information about the dog that led the council to make an immediate decision to not accept the dog. These statements were later rebutted by the actual kennel owner the following month when they came in and dispelled the rumors of the dog being sick, the dog being previously trained and not fit for police work. According to the minutes, the council immediately reversed that decision and accepted the dog.
So the items you reviewed here were, to summarize, if I understand correctly, the minutes and I believe information. Did you speak to Chief Walton with respect to this one?
I did. I spoke to the chief, as well as other council members and another police officer who was actively involved in the K-9 program.
I don't know if you did or not. Did you ever speak to the kennel owner?
No, I did not.
Okay. And the other police officer who was involved in the program, was that Corporal Tucker?
That is correct.
Okay. So moving on to allegation 7, failure to act on critical information concerning police personnel. Could you outline how this came to light and the standard that you're looking at here for asserting a transgression, and summarize the same information you've been doing for each allegation, please?
Allegation 7 is the failure to act on critical information concerning police personnel. It came to light during my interview with witnesses that Ms. Todd had received an email on or about August 26th of 2024 about a specific police officer at the time that contained serious allegations. The email, which I was provided a copy of it, had some serious allegations, as I mentioned, things that criticize the performance of the officer, credibility as a supervisor, and their potential suitability for future leadership, with a plea that before they consider promoting this individual, that they conduct a background investigation and look into the allegations. The assertion from the witness was that nothing was done about it. This communication was only addressed to Ms. Todd by email. I then followed up with that and contacted the chief of police, asking if there was any records of an internal investigation or any reports of anything from Ms. Todd or anything in that record. Recognizing that that timeline would have been before the current chief. The chief reviewed the records extensively. We had a conversation and confirmed that there was no report to the police department concerning that officer on that matter.
Okay, and I know that you're referring to that officer. I just want the record to reflect that I'm not going to ask you that officer's name due to confidentiality considerations in the context of a public hearing. Meaning the subject of the complaint. Meaning the subject of the complaint, yes. So your investigation ultimately revealed that, as best as you could tell, there was nothing done with the complaint itself after it was received.
That is correct.
Did you ever interview anyone at Post? And could you explain what Post is, and then, you know, let us know if you got any information from them about this?
Sure. Should probably say what led me to Post is that with that information, when I interviewed Ms. Todd about it, eventually she did acknowledge receipt of the email. And that was after we discussed her role and receiving complaints about any town employee, in particular a police officer, and the protocol to be followed. And she basically communicated to me if she received a complaint about a person on the civilian side, that she would handle it as the town manager, and if, you know, do whatever proper investigation. And then I asked if the complaint was about her. She said it would go to the council as her supervisor, and she indicated there was a complaint about the police personnel, that she would give it to the chief of police, or in absence of that, certainly the mayor or the council. When we talked specifically about that email, once I was able to refresh her recollection with a copy of it, Ms. Todd said her immediate response was, "Oh yes, I contacted Mr. Sean Moriarty at Post."
Say that name again for me, please.
Sean, comes S-E-A-N, Moriarty, M-O-R-I-A-R-T-Y. And Post, as to your question, is a newly formed department in the state, and it's Police Officer Standards and Training Commission. And that's empowered, I believe, by the governor, and they're responsible for overseeing police training, police functions. And so my next call was to Mr. Moriarty as the director of Post to inquire if there was a complaint made. I should say, before I made the call, that was a call based because Ms. Todd said she notified them. When I had asked for some clarity in the same interview, are you sure it was Mr. Moriarty? She changed her answer and she said, well, I'm sure I gave it to the council, or I gave it to the mayor. I again asked her because her questions, her answer started changing. She then said, I don't remember who I gave it to. I'm sure I gave it to somebody. So with that, as I mentioned, I did a Post follow-up call, and with Post, there was no record of any complaints made. He had no recollection of any conversation with Ms. Todd. He checked his email, had no communication from Ms. Todd about that particular officer. He did note that he had had previous conversations with Ms. Todd, so he did carefully go through his emails and assure me that there was no contact made. He also keeps a list of referrals that go out to other police departments. If an investigation would have been done, there was no record of an investigation with that officer being done as well. I also had an opportunity to review emails, because part of my interview with Ms. Todd, she had made some other comments about the complainant. And I was able to review her emails as well. I can go a little further if you'd like.
I think that's sufficient for purposes of my question, because I did want to, before I move too far ahead, I'm reminded, because of your explanation about Ms. Todd reaching out to Post, that I omitted follow-up questions involving allegation 6 and allegation 5 that I wanted, in fairness to Ms. Todd, to ask you about, which was what explanations Ms. Todd provided in those instances and how you viewed and digested her responses when you questioned her about these two allegations in particular.
Okay, how about if I get back to allegation 5 first?
Absolutely.
We're going to be now talking back about the failure to maintain professional conduct. Talking about first the explanation she provided for the comments in session with council. We did talk about that. Ms. Todd was defensive. She didn't feel her comments were disrespectful. She actually initially put blame on the mayor, saying that he was talking over me, was not allowing me to answer the questions, and she did indicate that she was frustrated, but she didn't think she was disrespectful. So she doesn't deny having the confrontational conversations with council. Specifically to July, just staying with the council theme before I go back to the incident after the June meeting. At the July meeting, she did indicate as well that the conversation was becoming elevated and heated. She did indicate that she felt that she had to leave the meeting for personal reasons due to the escalation that was going on at the meeting. With regard to the event on June, after the meeting, her response was not to deny it. She admitted having a conversation with the councilman that was in her room at the time. She does not deny the use of profanities, that she was loud, but she said, I was not talking about the chief, I was talking about somebody else. There was other police officer witnesses that were there. There was some statements made by the chief that another police officer perhaps had said something or had mimicked Ms. Todd in some way, and she said she had no recollection of that.
What about for allegation 6?
This is allegation number 6. This is the lack of candor and misrepresentation to council regarding the K-9 program. When I asked specifically Ms. Todd about the difference in statements, we talked about the executive session information that she provided to the council. She'd acknowledged that she obtained information from the veterinarian office that had treated the dog for the kennel. And she said she had information that she believed that was relevant. She did acknowledge that it came up in executive session. And when presented with the information that was rebutted by the kennel owner the following month, I had asked her about the difference, and she said, well, I don't remember what I said to council. Again, I questioned her a couple times, well, I said the council changed their ruling, correct? And she said, yes, they did. So she didn't deny that they provided other information. She did not deny that the council changed their decision. And when asked again, well, why the difference, she said, I don't remember what I told council.
So I'm going to go ahead to allegation number 8. Again, if you could outline your understanding of what the standard would be for this issue and why you felt the standard was transgressed, the information you received that led you to that conclusion, and then any explanation provided by Ms. Todd as well.
So allegation number 8 is the seeking special favors from developers regarding hunting access. And we talk about the standard that the town charter and the handbook provides that the town manager should avoid actions that create an appearance of personal benefit connected to town business. During the course of my interview of witnesses, after Ms. Todd was on leave from the office, an email had come in that was presented from witnesses addressed to Ms. Todd from a local property owner inquiring if her husband was still hunting on the property. And he wanted to avoid conflict with a tenant or a farmer on the property. Witnesses said that the property was within the town, and witnesses have reported overhearing conversations from Ms. Todd seeking permission from folks, her husband, to hunt in the town, in particular ones that have business with the town. So having that information provided and having access to Ms. Todd's email, I went in and conducted an email search for the person's names because it was two people were identified, and I was able to find the email for the most recent email that came in, and there was a chain of emails that confirmed that Ms. Todd had communications outside the regular scope of business, seeking permission for her husband being able to hunt on their property, and other emails back and forth within her own email confirmed that these individuals both had or were anticipating business with the town.
What was the business, if you could recall?
Well, the second one, I'm not sure if I understand your question.
When you say the business with the town, I was just curious if you could recall what you saw in terms of what the active matters were, or the questions they were asking related to town matters in the course of those exchanges.
If I recall, at least one of them, they were seeking a variance to something. I believe the discussion was on variances, issuing of permits, and at least others were talking about their desire to expand their businesses and use of particular properties.
So what you saw was Ms. Todd asking those individuals for permission for a family member to hunt on their property.
That is correct.
And who I know that there was some documents you saw. Who did you interview in terms of how that information first came to light or came to the surface? How did you first become aware of this?
One of the witnesses, and I can identify them if that's what you're interested in.
Sure, yeah.
Caroline Chisenwell, if I have the last name right. Chisenhall.
Yeah.
Spelling, I'm sure you're looking for.
Chisenhall.
Thank you, that is correct. In her interview, she had presented that information and had stated she works in the same office and she had heard numerous conversations about it. And she volunteered it. She said it made her uncomfortable and had questions about the professionalism of doing that.
Understood. And what did Ms. Todd provide when you asked her about this?
Interestingly, when I had asked the question if she had ever sought permission, her response was to laugh. And of course I looked at her and she said, I refuse to answer that, or I'm not going to answer that. I had told her that listening to the investigation, refusal to answer questions could be interpreted as failure to want to cooperate and to be honest. And I encouraged her again to ask the questions, and she says, well then, I don't recall. She changed her answer to I do not recall. And when asked specifically, she said, and I quoted it, I have never emailed and asked for hunting permission on a pending project, end quote.
So, what do you make of, if anything, of Ms. Todd's changing her response? You could just provide your impressions of that.
It was towards the end of the interview, and my impression just added to my concerns about candor and in particular about credibility of her as a witness.
I think you mentioned it briefly at the beginning of your explanation here, but could you just reiterate, what was the standard that you looked at to conclude that this was improper activity in your view?
Yes, I have reviewed the town charter and the personnel handbook to see if they had addressed those issues. And they do specifically address it as that the town manager avoids actions that create an appearance of personal benefit connected to town business.
And is it your view that asking specifically for a permission to hunt amounts to that sort of benefit?
Yes, in my opinion, it did cross the line.
And I just, again, to be clear, the emails requesting permission were sent from Ms. Todd's Town of Greenwood email address.
Yes, sir.
Understood. So could you just elaborate briefly before I move on to the next allegation? What did you mean by multiple allegations or reviewing multiple emails and so on? Could you elaborate on what specifically you saw there?
Yeah, there was a communication back and forth with both the individuals in question. Some of them mixed actually with town business, and I believe at least one of them, it was almost like, hate to kind of ask this at the end, kind of, oh,
I
by
didn't
the way.
hear that, I'm sorry, it's kind of like,
At the end, awkward, I think the word she might use is awkward to ask this, but is it okay if my husband hunts on your property? So the emails, the numerous emails back and forth between both property owners, again, were mixed with, there's quite a bit of emails with town business, as I mentioned earlier, things that were pending, and then sprinkled in were comments about the hunting, and even affirmation afterwards, appreciation, such as, and I'm quoting from her email, so excited, talking about her husband, so excited to go out and hunt that piece of greenwood, and I wanted to thank you. Including another one where she wrote, he is so appreciative to be able to hunt there. So there was a definite response back of appreciation for her husband hunting there.
And do you recall the names of the individuals she was interacting with?
I have them here and I'm happy to refer to them.
Please.
So the first person that, speaking of, was a gentleman named Casey Kenton, Kenton. And the second individual was a gentleman named Gus Kroll, Kroll.
Thank you. One of the items that we asked you to look into was with respect to whether or not Ms. Todd had been subject to any sort of harassment or retaliation. Because I believe there were some emails that Ms. Todd had sent expressing that she felt that that was the case. You investigated that concern, correct?
I did.
Could you just explain how you pursued that and what your ultimate conclusion was and why?
Yes, the same methodology. When I looked at this, I viewed Ms. Todd's concerns almost as its own separate standing complaint, which is not uncommon when I come in, that there are matters that we're looking at. So the same protocol was to obtain information. I had written emails that were shared with me that she had sent to individuals on the council with her concerns, specifically saying she feels that the environment was hostile and that she was being harassed. So I had, during my interviews, had asked each witnesses of what they had observed, very specific questions regarding potential things that may or may not have been harassment, things that may or may not have impacted her here at work, her ability to work, and things that are classically associated with harassment. Quite familiar with doing harassment investigations, as I mentioned, in the private sector. I do a lot of these. And so I already had known questions to ask and things I was looking for. What I was most interested in, and starting out my interview with Ms. Todd, I started out that interview with that vein as the complainant. And we spent quite a bit of time. I had asked her to explain to me why she felt she was being harassed, identify specific items, and we talked at length about that, looking to identify witnesses and things that would vary along. Throughout the course of my many interviews, Ms. Todd's interview, and reviewing the records, I did not come to the conclusion, and I did not substantiate her claims of harassment.
And why is that?
The claims, as what I have found, seem to be responsive, not only timely, but even her own words, to attempts by counsel to seek information, to manage processes, and to hold her accountable for her job function.
So when you say that, are you saying that, what exactly do you mean by that? If you can elaborate.
For example, Ms. Todd, one of her complaints that she said she was being harassed is that council members were making requests for information. These tend to follow-up meetings when you're looking for financial information. She would say, well, the requests were unreasonable. They wanted them in a short period of time. Certain requests coming from certain individuals she felt were targeted. She indicated not only that, but we mentioned the K-9 program and the police department coming from the chief of police asking for things that she viewed them to be hostile and harassing when I looked at them when they were legitimate requests for documentation. There was some response back from Ms. Todd as something was difficult to get in a timely manner, even communication with prior council members. That she would indicate, I'm not gonna be able to get it to you today, I need a little bit more time. But again, she presented this information to me as signs of harassment, and I read them to be requests for information that were, in my opinion, aligned with her responsibilities.
Moving on to allegation 10 on page 26. The words underneath it reference removal or destruction of town records. And if you could just elaborate on, again, the standard, the information that came to light as you conducted your interview, and why you so concluded in the manner you did here.
Starting again at the end of the beginning, that the charter, to what the standard requires a town manager to properly safeguard and administer all town records, ensure the confidentiality and security of those town documents, and to maintain the integrity of town operations by protecting public records from unauthorized removal or disclosure. Again, these are laid out as part of her functions. When I began this investigation, it was brought to my attention, and I was shown a video. There was a point in which the council had placed Ms. Todd on leave, and on the following morning, I was told that she was observed on video removing items from the office. And I observed the same videos. There were numerous trips in and out of the building, carrying boxes, items that could look like paperwork and items. So they asked me to investigate if she had removed items. There was talk from witnesses that things were missing from her desk. Apparently an entire drawer was empty. I had explored that. It was difficult to tell from the videos what was being removed. Some things were obvious, for example, maybe a plant or something there, but there were things that looked like file folders and other documents, but I'd have no way of knowing what was in those without speaking with her. I did interview one of the council members who had come up to meet with her at the time. That council member indicated that they only saw Ms. Todd make one trip out of the building carrying personal items, but the video clearly shows prior to them arriving, there was numerous 4 or 5 times in and out of the building. So there wasn't much credence I could give to that statement. Ms. Todd indicated to me that she did not remove anything from there that was not hers. I mentioned earlier when I was looking at emails, in particular for the hunting allegation, having to go in and look for emails from particular individuals, going through them. If you can imagine, the town manager had thousands of emails. I started to notice that there were emails from Ms. Todd's official Town of Greenwood's email to her personal Yahoo email. Now, at first glance, look back and forth, they look almost as if they were reminders, because sometimes they come like, don't forget to do this or that. At first, I thought they were just reminders, but then I noticed some of them had attachments, so I looked at, well, what is an attachment? And when I opened up the first emails, I realized that she had emailed to her personal email town records, copies of budgets, financial records, bank records. And as an investigator, that then opened the scope to take a look at how many of these. So I did a search for any email that was sent from her email to her Yahoo account. And at that time, discovered that she had approximately 21 emails over about a 15-month period of time in which she was forwarding emails that were noted confidential from town attorneys, from employees. They included budgets, police budgets in particular, records about the K-9. There were information forwarded about pending matters before the town, in particular with some town folk. So I documented this, noted it, and included it in my report, because as I looked at the town standard, that these records have no bearing on go into her personal email account, and there was also emails in there indicating that clearly Ms. Todd had access to her work email and records, so I saw no business purpose to be sending it into her personal email. Having known prior that she indicated she didn't remove anything that she said was not hers, and having been cut off from communication, I had no way of following up.
So you ultimately, for lack of a better term, stumbled across the fact that Ms. Todd had sent numerous town records to her personal email. Why did the act specifically of sending records to her personal email concern you?
Well, it's a great question. I immediately looked at it, well, why would you be sending business records to yourself if you have access through remote access and emails? As a professional and in this industry, and knowing that the standard is, these are confidential records. The first one, it said confidential, and it was not just concerning her, it was other town business, and that raised a flag as an investigator as a problem.
So of course this one, because I believe in terms of the sequence of events, this detail came to light after you had interviewed Ms. Todd?
Yes, that's correct.
So you didn't have an opportunity to circle back with her?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I couldn't email her. I was blocked.
Understood. What, if any, conclusion did you draw when you saw the volume of emails that she had sent regarding Ms. Todd's responses to your interview questions? In other words, did you actually ask her during your interview whether she had anything in her possession that would be considered town materials?
I did. I had asked that question, and I actually quoted in my report. She was asked whether she had any town property in her possession, and she answered clearly, quote, "I do not have any town property that does not belong to me, comma, no."
And what was your conclusion ultimately in light of that response once you saw all of these emails, if any?
My conclusion was that she had violated the town charter, and by not properly safeguarding, in my opinion, was a serious breach of administrative responsibility.
Could you briefly provide, because I know that Ms. Todd provided responses to many of these items aside from the the last one, could you provide, what your process was involving weighing? I know you provided the specific examples throughout where I asked you, but overall, because Ms. Todd's, presenting you responses to try to explain, mitigate, or address these issues. So what would your characterization or understanding be of Ms. Todd's testimony and how you ultimately concluded the way you did involving the outcome on the allegations?
Yeah, I think that's best explained by even taking a step backwards to methodology in conducting any time internal inquiry, investigation. And I come in, I have to interview a lot of folks. And oftentimes, we end up with he said, she said, and my job as an investigator is to evaluate the credibility of every witness that I interview. And I talk about when I come in, everyone's credibility is equal, whether you're the president or you're the janitor. I come in with that mindset, and from there, I start evaluating statements and I start evaluating each witness's credibility. And it's each person's responsibility, or what happens is they're either going to gain credibility or lose credibility. And I use that in weighing out the likelihood of an occurrence. And in this situation, specifically talking about Ms. Todd, as we proceeded through the investigation, statements that she was making started, first of all, becoming very vague. There was a lot of, I don't recall, I don't remember. When we started digging into specific questions, when I would present her with information, she would provide information that was not supported by the facts, was not supported by other witnesses. So throughout her interview, Ms. Todd's credibility started to slide. And at the end of spending about 3 hours with Ms. Todd, and as mentioned earlier, when I received the response, refused the answer to, well, then I don't recall, as I mentioned earlier, kind of affirmed that some of these I do not recall, perhaps for candor issues. So as a result, I had classified her credibility as substantially diminished.
Wait, I
had determined her credibility to be substantially diminished.
Thank you. I want to just ask a few general questions before I conclude your direct examination. When you were retained, did you know anyone, any of the players, so to speak, in this situation? Did you know any of the individuals involved, the witnesses and so on, any personal knowledge of anyone that you interviewed or anything like that?
No, I had nobody. Everybody I met was the first time I met them, and I'd never had any business here in Greenwood.
And did you have any knowledge at all of the facts that came to light prior to conducting your investigation?
No, not at all. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know anything about the town.
So you mentioned before, how you approach your investigation and your methodology. What did you fundamentally view your role? What was the task you understood counsel to have delegated to you with respect to your overall function here?
My job was to come in, interview witnesses, review the evidence, and gather the facts, and then summarize them and report to counsel. Legal counsel, that is.
Right. And in your experience, when an investigator is assigned, generally speaking, why do folks do that? And if you could explain, given that experience, your understanding of why counsel ultimately decided to bring an investigator, if you have one.
Not sure if I fully understand your question. So,
did you understand there to be any issues involving a desire to have an impartial third party examine these issues?
yeah, I thought that's where, yes, the reason I was brought in is to bring in someone from the outside to be that non-biased, independent investigator that can gather the facts.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that the Campanella investigative report be moved into evidence at this time, which is the town's Exhibit 20.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 20 is entered into the record.
And on that note, I do want to, I mentioned before concluding, I do have some questions about these specific exhibits before we conclude your direct examination, but, Mr. Hearing Officer, I've drank a very large quantity of coffee and I would like a brief reprieve, if that's okay.
Go off record. So we need to manage, access, and this would now be a good time, so if anybody needs access to a comfort break, there's one facility in there, I guess start lining up, who's got to
I'm
do?
gonna go before Anthony, I'm just kidding.
Whoever wins that race, that's the outcome.
He said, get the top over there, you can do in the precincts. We got two over there. Two over there. Yeah, go one at a time.
Yeah, I'll go last or something.
I go for it.
Can I go outside?
Are you done with it?
Sure.
Is there one outside?
Yeah, it's public access.
Yeah, Grassy Knoll. I have no problem going on the house. Mr. Shapiro,
Mr. Campanella,
good morning, sir.
how are you? Been a while.
Yes, good to see you. Is that your car you're okay?
No,
I didn't think so.
I came relatively incognito.
Okay,
I drove a truck.
okay. Let's see, would they airdrop you?
No. I have a fully electric vehicle, which has caused deep range anxiety.
Yes, I can understand, because you just can't pull in and fill it up in 2 minutes.
Right. It also sucks the juice much faster than I would have hoped. So, knowing, of course, that as we're coming more deeper into interior Delaware, there's few and far between charging places, so.
And not one here to plug in probably, so. Excellent. Well, good to see you, sir. Thanks for being here.
How's your
I
brother?
did.
He's good.
Still doing his thing?
Oh, yeah.
You still drag racing?
Yeah, he still gets out and still has his rails going and some drivers, and I'm like, all right, Paul, good luck. I'm like, you know, one of these times, I mean,
The safety gear up and.
he's got all that on, but you know how they go.
And it's just, yeah.
And even if all the safety are on, you know, he's 64, you get shook up in a steel box like that, from, you know, hundreds of miles an hour to a stop. Yeah, there's everything inside moves around, and, you know, he's 64, not 24.
Well, I'm sure you know. Are you gonna need to use the
I'm
facility?
gonna go last, I figure it'd be easier for,
Yeah.
I don't know how long.
That could be 25 minutes.
Right, and I don't know how long I'll be on afterwards, so I'd rather be the last one to go, because I can't slip out.
Thanks for being here. It's all right.
You wanna go over there to teach or you
Is there another bathroom you said somewhere?
Did you guys submit the charter as an exhibit by any chance?
No, but we do have it printed.
Alright, I got it, I got one, I just didn't,
Perfect.
I didn't
Yeah,
think.
it's locked, so it was like hard to.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, thank you.
How you doing?
Spelling.
Good to see you.
Clarifications.
Thank you so much. Okay, now, to get